my company's Yes Recycling. We're just in the process now of opening a new factory in Scotland, and we've got a lot of support there from Not Least Zero Waste Scotland and Scottish Enterprise and so on. And the factory itself is premised on technology that allows us to process low-grade film. So that's all the sort of complex stuff that normally gets chucked away, burnt or whatever. So it's a sort of I'd say a breakthrough technology in terms of recycling the unwanted plastics.
Yes, I'm David Harris. I'm the Chief Exec of Circularity Scotland. I've been involved in plastics and recycling now for 25 years. And I think the really exciting thing about what we're seeing with deposit return in Scotland is this is, for once, policy is really going in the right direction in terms of the way we handle materials. What deposit return means is, for anyone of my vintage, we're going back to the days when you buy a can of pop, a bottle of pop, you drink it, you take it back, you get a deposit back. You keep that material circulating. So the ambition in Scotland, which is coming, it's policy, and it'll be happening in the very near future, is that when you buy either a PET bottle of either soft drink or alcoholic drink or water, or an aluminium can, or a glass bottle, that's between 50 ml, a little tiny tonic water bottle, or your 3 litres of White Lightning, if that's what you're into, that you'll pay a 20 pence deposit. So for some of this, it can be quite significant. There's a real motivational effect of what we do with this. That 20% deposit will come back to you when you return that empty container to a designated return point. The scale of ambition of what we are doing in Scotland is remarkable. There are schemes in the world, Norway in particular is seen as the shining light. They only do 2 materials, we're doing 3. They have 14,000 return points. Our best estimate in Scotland is that we will have 37,000 return points. Your school canteen, again, if you're that way inclined, the prison canteen, but also Tesco, Morrison, Sainsbury's. So this will cover virtually every business in Scotland that's got any kind of beverage involvement. But not only that, we'll be dealing with 3 or up to 3 billion containers. The numbers are vast. And we're going with this. The day we go live, we're doing a lot. The other side to this, the ambition is actually if you have a home delivery, it's coming back to you. So what Circularity Scotland is, we're the little company in the middle that makes this happen. We aren't the deposit return scheme, we're all part of that. Circularity Scotland's job is to make sure the money moves around and the materials move around efficiently.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jim Fox. I work for Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific Partners. So that's quite an important part of a global company called the Coca-Cola Company. And we have territories all the way from Iceland through to New Zealand. We also run or are part of deposit return schemes in many of those countries, Norway, Sweden, Estonia, Australia. So, we've been doing this for a while. We are market leaders in soft drinks in this country and in many other countries. And market leaders in soft drinks also usually means, and probably does mean, market leaders in packaging. We know that we put out more packaging in the beverage industry than anyone else. But that goes with responsibility, and we know we are more responsible for getting that back, making sure that the right things happen to that than any of the other parts of the industry. We pride ourselves on some of the things that we've done already, and we are a very early supporter and adapter of DRS in Scotland. We came out very early in the discussions and said we would support DRS, and it's an absolutely necessary way forward if we're going to get to a circular economy which is self-sustaining in Scotland.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I think, a lot of the things that we see in terms of how people treat packaging, how they treat materials that are end of life for them, is that they want to understand how they can best recycle them, and what happens to those materials once they go into the recycling system. Can you say a wee bit about how you think, whether or not you think behaviour change is a key part of this, and what role your business plays in helping change people's behaviours towards packaging that can be recycled? David, you...
I think the important thing with DRS is there is a piece of financial motivation there as well. And let's all be honest, that will have an impact on the way people behave. Probably the one element of behaviour which I can never understand, which DRS is absolutely designed to start to address, is how when someone has had that drink, the empty bottle goes out of the car window. And if we do one thing, if we can address the litter problem in terms of behaviour change, I think that would be absolutely massive. I live in Ayrshire, rural Ayrshire. And one morning, I'd taken my daughter out. She goes out every Sunday morning, it's 8 miles from the house. Bear in mind, this is now a 20p deposit. Every Sunday morning, I see an old guy with a Jack Russell picking litter. And over the 8 miles, I actually counted up how many, what we call an in-scope container, I saw at the side of the road, 37 quid's worth of deposit, in the middle of nowhere, on a little piece of road. The volume of material that must actually be out there, let's change that behaviour. Now, surely, we're going to do one of two things. The deposit will get inside people's head that is something of value, why throw it through the window? Or if they're foolish enough not to get that, at least there's an incentive for the huge number of people that you now see who do go out and collect this stuff, that there's something could potentially come back, whether it's for charity or for them. But no, behaviour change around litter is vital. The other side to this, which is behaviour change is part of it, and I do think people want to engage with materials and what is happening to things once they've had their consumption of it. One of the beauties of deposit return, we stop materials becoming waste. And I think if this part of behaviour, which was the conversation earlier as well, people didn't used to waste stuff because they couldn't afford it. But we now have this society, we seem to generate a huge amount of waste. Again, if with deposit return, we're able to get people to start thinking about, if it's going into that reverse vending machine, good things are happening because it's being the stewardship of these materials is robust. When that drinks container comes back to us, we know what it is. Obviously, there's 3 materials. We're tracking this with an awful lot of detail, which means that the efficiency with which that material is recovered is very, very high. I'm afraid if you put it in a recycling bin, and this is my background, this is my industry background, when I put the recycling out, it breaks my heart because I'm watching different materials going together. I'm watching food waste going, in terms of residual going in the same thing. We're getting away from that. And maybe if people actually see that as being more robust and delivering a better job, it's motivational. You don't feel you're wasting your time when you do this, as well as novelty. There's lots of models about how this will build up. Is it going to be a gradual build-up? My personal view is I think it will be big bang, huge novelty. You go to a machine, you put an empty bottle in, you get a token, you can get value for the token. People are going to be quite keen on that. And I think people are very waste-minded. The challenge will be keeping that level up there. And hopefully, for me, 20p on a soft drink or a bottle of beer is surely enough to motivate people to do something responsible with that container.
Well, please, let's not open that debate again. But Omer, in terms of getting people to identify the kind of materials that, recycling will be able to manage in the future, what are your plans to help people understand how they can actually reduce their carbon footprint by separating out those difficult materials?
Yeah, I probably approach this in a slightly different way. It sounds awful to say, and especially to a room full of people who are here today because they care about this stuff, but we kind of work on the assumption that people don't care. And it's a terrible thing to say, and it's the sort of truth of it from where we sit, and what's coming through the waste streams. People don't carefully separate their materials. They do it for, because they've got into the rhythm of it now. ultimately, I think it falls on organizations, structures, companies to create a system that does the recycling and captures the value in waste without necessarily imposing sort of difficult and complex obligations on end users to do that. And that's within our grasp, and we can do that. I take on board your point about incentivizing people, and I just did a sort of back of a fag packet calculation at 20p a bottle, roughly, say 20 grams per bottle. You know, you're talking about £10,000 a tonne for the material. Now, virgin food grade PET is probably coming in around about £1,000 a tonne. So, you know, you talk of unintended consequences. Well, you know, at what point do somebody set up a PET plant and start making bottles to sell them into the DRS scheme? You know, you think that sounds crazy. You should see some of the stuff we see about exporting waste for getting PERNs. So, you know, there may be unintended consequences. You know, and on the subject of DRS, it is tremendous. You know, we have a sort of 60%, I think, bottle recovery rate in the UK as a whole, and hopefully we go up to Norway's level of 90-something. So that, you know, that's a gap. But, you know, we have already 100% of councils in the UK collecting bottles. We only have 14% of councils collecting post-consumer film. And that's by far and away, and by post-consumer film, I mean food packaging, wrapping. And that's by far and away the sort of the biggest chunk of unprocessed plastic that we need to tackle. And, you know, I look at what's been done about that over the last 15 years, and absolutely nothing has been done. We've got a terrible regulatory environment, which is through the packaging export recovery note system, where people are paid sometimes up to £10,000 per container to shove it in a container and dump it in Bangladesh. You can make money from doing that, and a lot of money from doing that. And that system, and we talk about EPR in plastics, and that was supposed to come in already at the end of this year, and maybe next year, and maybe the year after, and we still haven't seen any legislation. You know, we're miles off that. And it's shambolic. It's disgraceful. So, you know, yes, I sort of mildly applaud the DRS scheme, and I'm sure it's going to make a difference. Bottle recycling is already quite advanced, but compared to film recycling, we're not even out of the traps. So to answer your question specifically, what are we doing in Fife? We work there with Fife Council, have their own waste management company, Sarico. We're working with them to take all of Fife's curbside plastic. So after they've extracted PET and HDP, the milk bottles, everything else comes to us, and that's probably currently about 3,000 tons a year of film, even though they don't ask for it. So our ambition really is to come to the place where we can, together with Sarico, go to the residents of Fife and say, put all of your plastics, your films, your everything, your pouches, your multi-laminates, the whole lot in your curbside, and we'll deal with it. And that's where we want to get to. Then we're not asking anything of consumers, of householders that makes it difficult for them. This needs to be easy, this needs to be effective, and I think if you want to really change behaviors, asking people to do things is you know, you're already off to a bad start. So that's what we need to do, and that's what we're going to try and do in Fife.
Excellent. Jim?
I'm going to disagree slightly with you. I do think most people do care. You know, I do think they care. There's a small element of society that protest and use littering as a form of protest, but the vast majority of people do care. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted in this room. There is a say-do gap, and that's been well researched, that people often say they do things much more than they actually do. Particularly evident in sustainability and consumer behavior and sustainability. Lots of us say we are much greener and much more sustainable than we are. This deposit return system and deposits, and there are downsides to deposits, and there is opportunities for fraud, but the deposit return system in itself creates a quite significant nudge to close that say-do gap. You know, it makes sure that people who really do want to do it have the opportunity, because the machines are out there, the infrastructure starts to grow, and it becomes easier for them to do what they said they were going to do in the first place. I think that's a huge leap forward. I think that in-store and in the street and on the bus stop, people like Coca-Cola and other suppliers have got a duty to make it happen better, make it happen more often. We've been really good at selling products. We put the products in the right place. We make sure that people notice them. We get them at the right price and the right promotion. And that's all the front end of that. And you know, we've never really turned our attention fully. We put labels on packs saying this is recyclable or fully recyclable, but we've never really turned our attention to the back end, to the recycle. And I think you will start to see businesses that are really keen to do that now, because it's not just about DRS. DRS is a part of packaging, and packaging, for us at least, is 45% of our carbon footprint. If we want to make a commitment on a road to zero and on a 1.5 degree pathway, and we're committed to a 2040 date, we've got to get our packaging right. We can't achieve the rest without packaging, and we can't achieve packaging without DRS. That's what I would say.
I mean, I think that's a really important point in terms of, you know, to your point, Omar, there's lots of different systems out there. There's lots of different approaches out there. What can we do to help people understand how these different approaches fit together, and how we can actually start driving towards net zero, 1.5% target through responsible use of packaging, responsible design of packaging, and making it easier for people to do the right thing with the packaging at the end of the day, which is to your point.
So can I respond on that, and maybe, if I may, bounce back a little bit. So if you look at the DRS system, and I'm sure Coca-Cola are thrilled about it, because, you know, you've got a problem, you're putting a lot of plastic out there, you need to you know, deal with that. And DRS, I think in many ways absolves you of that, and perhaps let me explain, and I really, I'm not anti it, but I just sort of want to lay it out there, and if you look at it, so for 100,000 tonnes of plastic, for example, I don't know what the total quantity is in Scotland, but let's say for 100,000 tonnes of plastic at £10,000 a tonne, that's £1 billion. Okay, now that's the amount for £100,000 a tonne that system effectively sucks out of the consumer's pocket. Of course it isn't, because let's say the cycle might be 1 month between buying and getting your money back. So in terms of working capital, if you think of it as working capital, it would be 1/12 of that. So roughly 85 million or 83 million would be how much it would suck out of households' pockets to deliver DRS. That's money that households would have to spend that they now don't, because they're funding DRS. If you look at other systems, for example, in Europe, the plastic packaging tax of €800 per tonne going on, ensuring that recycled content is used in packaging. Now that's a big driver. That's a really big driver. And that would fall directly on the manufacturers of the packaging, not the consumers, to pay for that. And when you look at systems like that, you say, well, suddenly Coca-Cola is sitting there thinking, well, okay, now we've got to pay for this, so how are we going to drive collections? Maybe we're talking about, for example, having PET, to your point about people throwing PET bottles out of their car. So in every garage, I don't see any recycling bins in garages. Put your PET here, and there are thousands of them all over the place. So Why don't we have that? Why don't we have PET collection bins on the street, more of them? We've seen trials in Leeds and Edinburgh for those schemes which work very successfully. So I think there's a lot that could be done. And I know I sound like I'm really anti-DRS. I'm not necessarily anti-DRS, but I think there are other powerful tools that in the adulation of DRS, we are possibly neglecting a little bit, and we should take a closer look at to drive more circular behaviour.
And I suppose that's my point. Having worked on it for a number of months, years, I'm not aware of a lot of adulation for DRS, that has to be said. A lot of scars from it. But it is one part of the jigsaw. Nobody's suggesting for a second that DRS is the answer. And Jim, sorry.
Yeah, we didn't start on DRS. We thought we had a better option. We looked at, and as I said, we helped to run some of the DRS systems around Europe. And like the old Irish joke, you wouldn't start here. Some of the other places where DRS was established several decades ago, they didn't have a curbside collection system. The infrastructure wasn't there, and so they decided to have DRS. In Scotland and in the rest of the UK, there's a really good curbside collection system. It can be improved, but the basis is there. When I first went and had conversations several years ago with Zero Waste Scotland and various other people, my first intention was to really improve that curbside collection system, so that, and you hit the nail on the head earlier, Omar, that it didn't just focus on beverage containers, cans and bottles, but we actually did a really great thing for all waste, all the waste streams, and get it in the right place so that it's recycled, so it doesn't need to go to wherever it's going at the moment, whether it's Taiwan or China or whatever else. And we really tried to get the consistency, the local authority consistency, the joined-up approach of local authorities. And we failed because of the local politics and the national politics. And we decided that was a really difficult nut to crack, but we were running out of time. We didn't have the time to fix politics that wasn't going anywhere. And consumers, shoppers were telling us we needed to get ahead of this game. Blue Planet was on the TV. David Attenborough was telling us that this was the wrong thing to do. And we decided that in the absence of movement in the places where we thought we could do the best job, we had to do the second best job, which was DRS.
Sorry, I'm going to, it's your. I know you did. So I totally accept what you say, and I think it's I appreciate that DRS will deal with some issues that need dealing with. I think my overall frustration really is around the whole policies coming out of. Well, for the last 15 years we've had coming out of Westminster, but hey, apparently recycling doesn't matter. But the policies we've had coming out of there for the last 15 years that been echoed in SEPA as well, it's just been terrible, and particularly the bottles are almost the success story of recycling to date. It's the thing that we have the highest recycling rate across any sort of plastic product. So, the real work needs to be done in the other materials, downstream materials.
And, let's not get into fixing Westminster policies and politics in this session, because we've only got about 27 minutes left, so I think that's beyond even these panellists. But David, do you think that there's something more that we should be doing to help people understand the carbon impact of consumption and resource use that might help drive some of the thinking that, for example, Blue Planet and litter started to shine a light on what happens to disposed of containers? Is there something more different that we can do to help people understand the carbon emissions associated with consumption?
Can I come to that? Because I don't want to sort of ignore the comments of the last however long it is since I spoke, which has been, it's interesting, I sit in the middle and sympathise with all that's being said. And if we cut back to behaviour change, back in the mid-90s, we implemented the packaging waste regulations in the UK and introduced something called the Packaging Export Recovery Note. That was a piece of equipment that incentivised the export of commingled waste. It was incredibly successful. The UK has exported billions of tonnes of waste to unknown places. And when I look at DRS, it's a sigh of relief because there's a piece of legislation there that's actually got an incredibly valuable role to play in driving some really positive behaviour change. And when I look at the waste that we generate, let's stick to plastics because we're all sort of got an involvement in that. At the very top, if we can capture that PET bottle in as close to virgin state as possible, it can be recycled very, very efficiently at a much lower cost. So that actual bottle as a piece of scrap has a highest value. But not everything can be managed that way, and therefore we need multiple solutions to this. There's lots of things that for perfectly valid technical reasons don't fit that mold, and we need other solutions that come together with that. But I think we need some really intelligent commentary around this. We've had years and years of dogma. Both myself and my colleagues in the industry who have been around recycling plastics in the UK for a long time were telling the government that the ocean plastics on beaches in the Far East was going to happen because we saw all the material going out to the Far East. When I started at this in the mid-90s, the business I was in, we were the largest producer of carrier bags in Europe. What we made them out of was recycled waste in the back of supermarkets. The law changed and wiped that industry out. So there's so much has happened that's been incredibly negative around this. And it's just been ill-judged. And actually, I think the most important thing is to get some really sensible, fact-based commentary out there so that people can really understand. Because if you recycle, we heard about car engines before, if you can efficiently recycle a material, it is far better than bringing virgin materials out of the ground. We need not necessarily complex solutions to complex problems. We need to try and find ways to simplify a lot of this. Simplify materials, keep materials apart. There's loads we can do. But I think actually if we equip, we're the public, if we equip ourselves with better information, we can make better decisions. But there's been some policy and dogma have not helped us to get to where we are. I think that common sense and visible steps people can take and really understand what they're doing could make a difference. None of these solutions is perfect. We need lots of solutions. Many complement one another. But actually getting some real sensible information out there would make a big difference.
And as you say, it's a system, and sometimes pulling a lever in one place has an unintended consequence in another, and then our understanding of what works well, what the microplastics wasn't a thing 10 years ago, it's a thing, a very real thing. Jim, do you think introducing a conversation about carbon emissions associated with consumption and materials would complicate that conversation, or can we put it in the context of the circular economy?
I think the simple answer is it depends on your audience. I don't think it works in a supermarket on a shelf. But I think for an audience like this or at COP, we need to talk about it like that. I think that if we talk to government, we can do both. The most emotive things you can talk about here are usually in the public arena, it comes down to plastic and litter. It doesn't come down to carbon and recycling and things like that. So people are motivated by getting less litter or resolving the litter problem and resolving what they believe the plastic problem is. And we try and remind people, it doesn't work all that often, that packaging is not necessarily bad. You need packaging, you need good packaging, you need packaging that doesn't end up in the wrong place. That's key. But some of these messages are really even too complicated. And what you end up doing, and this is a long story, and I need to keep it as short as possible. But you need to get back to, instead of putting more and more labels and more messages on packs and on shelves and on posters, you need to get to a stage where the shorthand for the message is in the brand or in the shop or the retailer, so that the ordinary consumer, the ordinary shopper, can leave behind all of the calculations and just say, Tesco does it well, I'll shop there, or Lidl does it great, that's where I'm going to put my shopping basket, or Coca-Cola has a really good record on carbon reduction. All of them kind of things need to be, it comes right back to reputation and brand value, because if we keep putting more and more labels on packs, the packs are not getting any bigger, and they just get more confusing. You've got to put a label on now for ingredients, for salt, for sugar, for calories. How you know, most shoppers can't understand and don't want to understand that. So we got to prove that there are some companies and some materials that are good and some that are not so good, and let people decide for themselves in the shorthand way.
I think Jim's made a good point. There's an awful lot of communication out there. If you can make a connection in people's mind that there is a positive step between their actions around recycling and a carbon impact, that will be positive. But I just worry that there is so much information, good, bad, or indifferent, being shared with people. If we can actually keep simple messages, stop litter, keep materials circulating, however it is, let's just keep the messaging really, really simple, because you can't achieve everything. So if you bombard people with information, there's a risk you actually disengage them. And it's better to engage 70% of people in a very, very positive way than to have 20 who are fanatical about something, everybody else is disengaged. So I just think we've got to be careful around the way we message this.
Yeah, so I sort of have I think there's a really one clear way to deal with this. And I take both your points. You're saying that, too much messaging, people don't get it, people don't read it, blah, 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 and I fully appreciate that. I'm not sure that brand identifying is the way forward. I think that's got sort of branding, greenwash arms race written all over it. I think the one clear way that people understand is pricing. And where free market economics fail, the role of governments to step in and put systems in that correct that failure. And currently we're living in a world where we have a free market economic failure when you contemplate that the impact of materials and consumerism on the planet is not built into pricing. So an illustration of where you have government intervention on pricing to correct or to account for a social cost would be in the taxation around cigarettes and the regulation around packaging around cigarettes. And there you've, very simply you've said, here's a product that's causing untold damage and cost. We're going to correct that through a pricing mechanism. And there is no reason why consumer products on the shelf shouldn't effectively have that. Small story, because I love this one. I was in the shop with one of my kids, and they were whining about being hungry, and so they wanted a packet of crisps, and I looked at it, it was a packet of crisps, £1.50, and I thought, not very nutritious, and we're going to fill them up. So I marched them over to the fruit and grabbed a bunch of bananas, 9 bananas, £1.36, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm Dad of the Year. I've got something that's cheaper, more nutritious, better for them, and look, 9 bananas, that's brilliant. And then I was on the way back home thinking, well, actually, funnily enough, those bananas have come from Tenerife, and the farmers collected them there and sold them to a wholesaler, who's then imported them, brought them to a supermarket, taken them to their RDCs, split them up, delivered them all over the UK to their shops, and here they are, 9 of them for £1.36. That doesn't look to me like the cost of the transportation and delivery and everything, the social impact of that is built into that price. And I think, if we really want to do this, the answer long-term ultimately will be for government to start putting for want of a better word, a carbon tax on consumer products to force choice in the right way.
And one of the approaches that was adopted COP26 in the Blue Zone was carbon labelling for food. So it allows people to make a choice. And I know your point about how many labels can one container bear. But if you have carbon labelling on food, then, as I say, it helps people make an informed choice. And if it is to take the high carbon option on this occasion, then it's maybe lower carbon options in the future. And the whole labelling and packaging conversation has got to be key to helping people make the right decisions based on what's most important to them going forward. I mean, in terms of adopting the circular economy and really driving it, we were talking earlier about the need for pace of change. What do you think is the sort of key component? Is it around regulation? Is it around consumer behaviour change? What do you think will really help us drive the adoption of the circular economy over the next few years? Jim?
Thanks, Jill. The next few years, for us, it's reputation. It's definitely reputation. And there's already taxes at play. The plastic packaging tax this year, or next year in April, will come into play, and everyone, all the producers will need to find 30% recycled plastic to put into their packaging, or else they will pay a £200 a tonne tax. That's a great idea, and it starts the ball rolling, as Omar suggests. The problem we've got at the moment with that, and we're already above 30% recycled material in our packaging, so we didn't have a problem with the principle of that. But there's only so much recycled material in this country at the moment, so we're taking quite a lot of it. The demand for that's going to go sky high as the tax. It will equalize in the end, and the pluses and minuses of paying the tax versus the money you're going to pay for recycled material will find a level, and also it will generate investment in the reprocessing industry for the longer term. But in the short to medium term, that will cause a real big problem for a lot of usually the medium to small size businesses, because the bigger businesses will find that material, whether they find it here or they find it abroad, they will find it. So I think for us, the taxation's not as important as the reputation. In Coca-Cola, you learn to live with this. It goes with the territory. I'm not complaining. We are the market leader. But when Panorama does a program, they put us on the front of it. When Blue Planet does a program, we're on the front of it. That's great. I don't have a problem with the programs. They're making the right noises, and they're trying to generate the right kind of changes. I got a bit fed up actually defending it as on a personal front as a Coca-Cola rather than as a beverage industry. But that's not how you sell TV programs. I think reputation for us is the thing that will drive it.
Sorry,
I think in terms of actually how we drive circularity within the population at large is probably quite difficult to really find an answer for, because to some extent it just seems like such common sense. Why aren't we doing it anyway? But we have a consumer throwaway society. We talked about it earlier, and I think there needs to be some real attitude change. I think big business And you could argue whether it's through good intentions, necessity, PR. I think big business actually is pushing at this quite hard from what I see. You've got, I think, smaller businesses. Yes, some smaller businesses are perhaps suited to it, but there is a risk this could disadvantage them. So in the SME space, because of resources, it's much more difficult. We see it in terms of big companies with lots of resources, when they're confronted with a problem, can throw resources at it. We estimate we'll be dealing with 4,500 producers out there. A lot of those will be tiny microbreweries, employing 1 or 2 people. They haven't got a team they can throw at this. One major retailer, we believe, has got 90 people working on DRS at the minute. Most of our producers won't employ 90 people. So I think there's unintended consequences. We've got to be careful about this. But the other side to this, we as individuals, our kids who are supposedly more environmentally engaged but need a new iPhone every 2 years, probably the ones who've got the biggest change to make, because culturally we're going away from this and we're becoming more consumer-based. So I think there is the public needs to do a part of this as well, but it needs to be fair across business. We've got to be careful about what it does to smaller businesses.
Well, I mean, really, I sort of said the first piece, I think, the cornerstone should be a sort of a tax mechanism at a consumer level, and I've already explain my thoughts on that. But I think there are other levers that need to be pulled. And I think that's probably where government also should come in terms of shaping how the interplay works between recyclability rates on materials. So EPR, the proposed EPR with the modulated fee structure starts to address this if it ever comes and when they ever work it out. But this great white unicorn of hope that we hang on for, where we migrate from the dumping in Bangladesh model to recycling domestically. So if this ever happens, forcing changes in the packaging makeup to make it more recyclable, that's a key one. And there are some regulatory drivers proposed that will do that. And then the final thing really, I think, is about imposing tougher rules on demanding recycling through the councils. It's shambolic. Everybody knows every council up and down the whole UK has a different policy. There's no unity. It becomes very difficult for an industry to build an infrastructure to recycle materials where around every corner everybody's doing something different. So there are sort of basic things like that that haven't been done in Westminster. And not that I'm some, tub-thumping activist nutcase, whatever. But, the regulatory environment in our country around recycling has just been so poor. I mean, totally poor. So we come to a situation where suddenly everybody wants people like Coca-Cola, why aren't you recycling, why aren't you recycling, why aren't you using recycled materials? And there isn't the infrastructure here to do it because nothing's been incentivized for the last 15 years to make that happen. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. And there are going to be some growing pains. We're going to be asked now to react very quickly, as Jim was saying. Coca-Cola is suddenly going to have to go from here to there, and people are going to demand it, and there's going to be pains as we adapt to that. And that's going to happen. I just hope government pull their finger out and get with the program. Corporates want it, the recycling industry wants it, waste management wants it. And I think government need to wake up and understand that they need to be the adult in the room and deal with this.
Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're out of time now, and it's always really interesting when you get lots of different opinions in a panel. It would be really dull if we're all sitting agreeing here blandly with each other. What I really took from this is simplicity around messaging. Keep the packaging simple for consumers to help them understand what the easiest thing to do. And let's try and help to simplify the collection system that there is across let's just start with Scotland and we'll leave the rest of the UK to sort it out themselves. But Omer, David and Jim, thank you so much for your time today, and hopefully soon, if you're able to hang on, you'll be able to meet some of the companies who are putting circular economy into practice, as you all are yourselves. So thank you very much for your time.